Hi everyone, this is Attorney Lillian and I am here today with your Tuesday tip. If your spouse decides that they are no longer either interested in the marriage, you two have separated, divorced, or it's time for the interview and they basically say, I don't want anything to do with you or this interview. Well, you have options, okay? So we're going to go through the steps and the options with you. The first thing you need to do, number one, is assess your situation, okay? You need to figure out what is your situation. Is it that you filed jointly with your spouse and now you two are not divorced and you don't know what to do? Or have you two filed for divorce, right? And you're just waiting for the divorce to be finalized because your options are going to depend on these things. Well, one option, if you are not actually able to attend the interview, for example, if you are out of town or out of the country at the time, you can ask for a reschedule. If you have another appointment that you cannot get out of. So let's say you have a doctor's appointment that's like very important that you cannot miss, then you can ask USCIS to reschedule your interview. If you have a work engagement where you have to travel for work or you have to make a huge presentation for work, you're not really able to miss that day, you can also ask for a reschedule. So in order to reschedule your appointment, you have to have a good reason that USCIS recognizes. Right? Instead of rescheduling, you can attend the interview. But now, let's talk about the fact that you filed jointly with your spouse, right? You filed that application jointly with your spouse, and now you're going in by yourself. You're going to the interview by yourself. What can you do? Right? So for an I-751, there are waivers available. All right. So you have the option to file jointly with your spouse or to file under one of these waivers. And the waivers are abuse, divorce, or exceptional hardship. But here's the thing. Just because you qualify for a waiver is not enough, because you still have to meet the requirements of the I-751, which is showing that you and your spouse entered into your marriage in good faith and you two continue to build a life together. All right. That is the key, right? The officer wants to make sure, one, that you entered your marriage in good faith, and two, you are either filing jointly with your spouse or you are filing under a waiver. Now, if it's 2 days before your interview, your abusive spouse decides they're not going to attend the interview with you, they basically shut you out, will not talk to you, what do you do when you go to the interview, right? Because you filed jointly, the interview notice says that you and your spouse are supposed to show up for the interview. What can you do to change it from filing jointly to a waiver? Well, it's really, really simple, right? You go to your interview, you get in there, the officer is going to ask you a few questions, and you are going to tell the officer that you want to change your application from filing jointly to filing based on a waiver, depending on the waiver that you qualify for. So now let's talk about what documentation you will need for each of those situations. It is so important that you go through that first step of assessment, the second step of figuring out where, what your next step should be. Is it to reschedule, to show up to the interview and tell the officer you're filing based on a waiver? right? So those are your options there. So when you filed your I-751, I'm sure you sent in documentation to prove that your marriage is real, that you and your spouse were living together if you were still together at the time. When you're going to your interview, you should still bring additional documentation of your relationship. Now let's talk about what documentation you will need for each of those situations. It is so important that you go through that first step of assessment, the second step of figuring out where, what your next step should be. Is it to reschedule, to show up to the interview and tell the officer you're filing based on a waiver, right? So those are your options there. So when you filed your I-751, I'm sure you sent in documentation to prove that your marriage is real, that you and your spouse were living together if you were still together at the time. When you're going to your interview, you should still bring additional documentation of your relationship. Okay, so that is your tip for today. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. And if you like this video, go ahead and share it. If you know someone who needs to hear this, go ahead and share the video with them. If you like what I'm talking about, like the video. And if you're watching in a place that you can subscribe and you do not want to miss any of my uploads, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And I am Lilian Chukura. I am the lawyer and owner of Lillylegal, where we help our clients get status for themselves and for their family using the U.S. immigration law system. Thank you. Bye.